What is your current salary? Answer. It's not that easy, is it? You know why they ask this question in job interviews? They ask it because they have absolutely no idea how much to pay you. Welcome to Q&A. My name's Bill, the company's expert, and today we're going to look at a question that was sent in by Jim Wild. Jim writes, "Hi, how do you avoid when the question is phrased as, what is your current salary? Particularly when your current salary sucks. Thanks." That's awesome. Thanks for that, Jim. Okay, that's a great question. Now, it turns out opinion is divided on whether interviewers are even allowed to ask you that question or not. And then if they do ask you that question, opinion is also divided on how you should answer, whether you should give them a full disclosure and answer their question with numbers, or you should refuse to answer the question based on the fact that it's personal confidential information that's quite frankly none of their business, and there's also privacy issues involved. There's a lot of controversy around this question, and I'm not gonna really get into the controversy, other than to say it includes even things like industrial espionage. And I know all you guys are interested in industrial espionage. That's why you came here, right? But think about it for just 1 second. If you owned a company and you want to find out how much your competitor is paying their employees, this is a perfect way to get that information. Post a job, have your competitor's employees apply for it, and then when they come in for an interview, just ask them, and some of them will tell you. It's just that simple. Okay? So I can't speak to that, but what I can tell you is what's going on here, why the interviewer is asking you that, and what they do with the information that you give them. Okay? And I feel I can do this because I've been a hiring manager for many years, and also I currently teach compensation at a university to recruiters, so I feel I can speak on this issue. Okay, now, it turns out also that it's quite hard to place a value on an employee. Okay, what is an employee worth? That's a very tough question to answer. And if we can find the employee's value, then that kind of frames what their compensation should be, how much we should pay them. Okay, this is a tough question to answer, and there's many different methods of doing it. For example, you could use market pricing, which is more like a supply and demand kind of way of determining what someone with certain skill sets should be paid. You could look at how much money that employee adds to the company's bottom line every year, and use that as a sort of yardstick for determining their value and therefore their compensation. You could look at that employee's track record. Have they added value to other companies? And if so, what was it? You could look at their education and their experience, those credentials, and determine how much time, money, and effort went into getting those credentials, and use that as a way to value them. You could look at their potential. You could look at their potential and their likelihood of achieving that potential at your company, and use that as a way of determining their value and therefore their compensation. So besides this, there's many more. And what large companies do, large organizations, is they kind of do a bunch of these, and then they try and sort of average the results out, and that's how they determine the official approved salary ranges for each position in their company. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. And the key takeaway here is that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors involved, and guesswork. Now, to avoid completely beating this to death, to make a point, I would like to give you one example that might help clarify it even more. Let's say we have 2 employees that form a company. Okay, we could call these employees anything, but for our example, let's call them Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Okay, and they both form a company, and that company, let's say, creates $1 billion every year. So they generate $1 billion of value every year. Okay, so Steve Jobs plus Steve Wozniak equals 1 billion. Now let's say we have a second piece of information, and that is that Steve Jobs, the first employee, goes out on his own and forms another company. We could call that company anything, but for this example, let's call it Next Computers. Okay, now Steve Jobs forms Next Computers, which goes bankrupt and is worth zero. Okay, so Steve Jobs plus Steve Wozniak together equal $1 billion a year. Steve Jobs on his own equals zero. Now, let's pretend Steve Wozniak applies for a job with your company. How much money are they worth? Now, we don't know. What we do know is Steve Wozniak with Steve Jobs is $1 billion, and Steve Jobs on their own is zero. We can back that up with evidence, with numbers, and we can demonstrate it. Okay, we can defend those facts. However, how do we defend what Steve Wozniak is worth? Now, is Steve Wozniak worth 50% of $1 billion? Is he worth 5% of $1 billion? Is he worth 95% of $1 billion? We have no way of knowing. Now, of course, everybody's going to have their opinion, right? But that's all they are. They're opinions. Okay? There's no evidence you can turn to prove that Steve Wozniak is worth a certain dollar amount. Okay? And that's what's going on in a job interview. And that's why the interviewer, whether they're a hiring manager or a recruiter, is asking this question. When they say, what's your current salary? They're wanting not necessarily an accurate answer to how much you're worth, but they're looking for a defendable, reasonable answer to place a value on you. And what better way than to say, well, this employee was making this much money at their last place of employment. So if they were making $50,000 there, it's reasonable for us to offer them, say, $52,000 here. Okay, you could defend that. You could say it's not just our opinion. This is the opinion of your previous employer. Okay, and you accepted it, therefore confirming it. So that's what's really going on here. They're wanting to place a value on you, and they have no idea how to do it, and that's why they're asking this question. Now, to get back to Jim's question, what I can say is that if I was asked this question, if I was a candidate and I was asked this question in a job interview, what I would do is I would say something like, well, I have a personal policy of not disclosing that information because it's confidential and private, and there are potentially some privacy issues here. So I'm sure you understand. That's what I would say. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reduce the awkwardness in the interview of me refusing to answer a question, but yet I'm sticking to my guns. I'm not going to give a number. I'm not going to give anything that sort of places a value on me, certainly not one that's determined by my last employer, because like in Jim's question, the implication is that they're really underemployed in their last job. So that shouldn't be the benchmark for which they place a value on you. If you're a student and you've just come out of school with a fancy degree, and they ask you, what were you making in your last job? And your last job was, a job before you had any educational qualifications and you were making minimum wage, that's not really a valid determinant of how much you're worth now, is it? So for that reason, that's why I would answer why the way I did. Okay? So I can't tell you what to say. It's up to each and every one of you, but hopefully I've framed the question better. What I would also do is I would wait till the end of the interview process where they've selected you and sent you an offer letter, and only at that point would I engage in any kind of salary negotiation or give any numbers that place a value or potential value on what I'm worth. Okay? If you get to the end of the selection process and you know that they're hell-bent on hiring you, and you know that if you refuse their offer, it means that they now have to go back and do another round of job interviews and background checks and do all this work, which costs time, money, and energy to do this, you have some bargaining power, okay? So that's when you can start talking about money and where you have a little bit of room to negotiate. Remember, they have no idea what you're worth. And if you can come up with some kind of reason to justify that you're worth more towards the upper part of the range, that often works to sway people's opinions. And it is all opinions. So thank you very much. I hope you found this useful. Keep these intelligent questions coming. It's great for me to see what people are wondering about, so I know what to answer, and I try and be as helpful as possible. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a great week. Take care.